Hi, this is Kevin Trainer, and welcome to part one of my tutorial for the exercises related to the chapter 11 from the Severance text. And this is the chapter about regular expressions. So, in the tutorial for exercise one, we're going to be analyzing a text, and we're going to be looking for a particular character string, and we want to find it in a number of contexts, and uh, we want to count up how many times that a character string occurs and in what context. So, what's the text that we're going to use? Well, one source for textual content that I find very helpful is a project called the Gutenberg project, or Project Gutenberg. And Project Gutenberg is a repository for open source text uh, of all kinds, primarily things like novels and poems and things like that. So the works of Jules Verne, who I'm a fan of, the works of Jules Verne are have all moved into the public domain in the United States. So um, the copyright is long expired. And what we have here is we have a copy of Jules Verne's novel, Journey to the Center of the Earth. And this was a pretty important book to me as a boy. It's one of the first novels that I read that I just got interested and got a copy of it and read. And it really, really made a big impression on me. And the general story is there is a young man, say about 20 or so, and he's going to accompany his uncle, who's a scientist of some sort, I think a geologist. And they're going to try to journey to the center of the Earth by going down through an opening in the crust of the Earth that was formed by a volcano in Iceland. And this guy's pretty well taken by his uncle. So he talks about his uncle all the time. So it's uncle this, uncle that. So the narrator is saying, you know, my uncle this, my uncle that. And I thought, well, this would be a great place to count up the references to the word uncle in a number of contexts. And if we just kind of go down through this, we're going to find here's an uncle here. Um, Here's an uncle here. Let's see. Here's another uncle here. Uncle, uncle, uncle. Okay, so this is the string to look for. So uh, I'm going to create a program that's called My Uncle. I should probably have called it something more like Finding My Uncle, but I didn't. In here in my tutorial project, I've got just the beginnings of it. So it's called myuncle.py, and the intention of the program is count lines containing a target string in the input file. And maybe we want to say something like that. Um let's say count lines containing a target string uh, in the input file that occur in a particular context. Okay. And what I mean by context, things like uh, how many have them at, how many lines say uncle at the beginning of the line, how many say uncle at the end, how many say uncle at the beginning and the end, things like that. Okay. And this is just for us to get the hang of these uh, regular expressions. Okay. So what do we have to do? Well, I'm going to copy a lot of this code from my already baked version. But the first thing that you want to do is you want to import uh, the regular expression package, which is called RE. So we want to bring over an import RE. And then we want to skip 2 lines. And we want to, we're going to have a typical structure for the program. So we have a main, and it's going to be empty for now. So we'll say pass and 2 blank lines. And then we'll have the invocation to main, just like that. And we need to end this with an empty line. And that's what we've got. So far, PyCharm seems to like the code that we have. Okay, so what are we generally going to do? Well, the code that we want is in a file. So we're going to want to open the file. We're going to want to read through the file. We want to read each of the lines of the file in turn. And then we want to figure out whether it can be counted for some kind of category or other. And then we're going to go on to the next line. When we're done, we want to close the input file because that's the polite thing to do. And then we want to print the results. Okay, so we've been keeping some counters all along, and we're going to want to report back on the counts that we have of the context in which we found the string uncle in how many of the lines. Okay, so let's look at this. So I've got really three groupings of code that I'd like to show you. Okay, so my first grouping is kind of what I would call my housekeeping code. All right, this is the stuff with that I'm going to use to get ready to do the processing. Okay, so I'm gonna print a polite message that says the intention of the program. Do you have to do this? No. I think it's always important to tell the user that the program is starting and they know, what the context is. So printing out these polite introductions does actually serve a purpose. And then we're going to prompt for the file name. Please enter the input file name. We're going to open the input file. Okay. And we're going to call the object that that holds the variable that holds the reference to the file object that we've opened is going to be called infile. And we're going to open it for reading, and the encoding is going to be UTF-8. Now, I think in past semesters, I was doing fine not including this encoding UTF-8 until I got to these things that I downloaded from Project Gutenberg, and we finally got into some text that was that required us to explicitly say it was encoded in UTF-8. And so we've adopted this as our standard approach to opening a text file in our class. And then we want to keep a bunch of counts, and we want to initialize them all to 0. So, okay, so this is, the first one is a count of the lines that contain the word uncle. The next one, a count of the lines that begin with the word uncle. Next one, a count of the lines that end with the word uncle. The next one, uh, a count of the lines that begin or end with the word uncle. And finally, a count of the lines that begin and end with the word uncle. There should be too many of those. All right. So this is, if I was to put some kind of pseudo code oriented comment here, I might call this housekeeping. Okay, so we just get the program started, get everything open, initialized, ready to do the work. And then we come down here and I've got my processing. Okay, so this is going to be, let's put a pseudocode kind of comment, main processing loop. Okay, that's going to take care of that. And then what am I going to have when I'm done? Well, I'm going to have something. The last thing I'm going to do is I'm going to have cleanup and print report. Okay, so we've got that. So what's our main processing loop going to look like? Okay, well, it's going to look like this. Again, I'm going to copy it from my already coded version. And instead of watching me type, I'm going to walk you through it. Okay. So we can just, we've had, I think, a good discussion in the current semester. If we're reading a text file, when do we just want to use for the line in file? And I think the two requirements that I have that tell me that I'm going to use this construct is one, that this is a file that I'm going to read from the disk. This is not something that's going to be coming from the console. So Python is going to be easily able to detect when we've come to the end of the file. Okay, so it's not console input, so it qualifies for that. And the other thing is I intend to read it to the end. So I'm not going to have to break out of the loop. And I mean, there are ways to break out of the loop, but it's easier to do that if you code a while loop by hand. Okay, so we're just going to use for line in file, and then we're going to have a bunch of tests. But before we test it, this is a common thing that we do in text processing, is we're going to shift all the characters on the line that you can shift to lowercase. We're going to shift them to lowercase. And the trick here is we don't have to look for uncle all lowercase, uncle with an initial cap. We don't have to do all that kind of stuff. So once we have shifted the line, everything's going to be in all lowercase. Now, the spaces and the special characters are going to remain the same. Okay, and now we've got let me just add a space, a blank line here. So now I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different tests where I'm going to bump up a count. So what are the counts that I'm going to bump up? Well, the ones that I initialized to 0. So I have a line count for if it contains the string at all, line count for if it begins with uncle, line count for if it ends with uncle, line count for if it begins or ends with uncle, and I've got a line count for begin and end with uncle. Okay, and in all the cases, I'm gonna take the line count, and I'm gonna plus equal it with 1, which is essentially to bump it up by 1. They all start at 0, and I'm going to bump them up by 1. So how do I count uh, whether uncle occurs in the string at all in any context? Well, I just, first of all, you notice all of my regular expressions are expressed in raw strings. Okay, I've really gotten to the point where and I'm recommending to you that you just use raw strings all the time when you express a regular expression um, pattern in Python. Do you have to do it all the time? No, but I think it's a good practice. Okay, so we're just looking for the character string uncle, and we don't say it has to be at the beginning or the end or anything like that. So in that case, if we have uncle anywhere in the line, we're going to bump up the counter. The next one, if it's at the beginning of the line, so we have the circumflex and then the characters for the word uncle. So the circumflex says match from the beginning of the line, and then we bump up that. Sort of the corollary to this is the $ meta character. When you put it at the end, says that these have to match at the end of the line. Okay, so if it's the end of the line, then we bump up. Uh, the uh, the bar or the pipe symbol is I like to call it the OR bar. Okay, and so we just take the two expressions we've already used and we connect them with the OR bar, and this says either it begins with uncle or it ends with uncle. Okay, and then the one down here, the last one, it has the same character strings for begin and end, but in the middle we have a dot and an asterisk. So the dot says any character, okay, and the asterisk says 0 or more of them, okay. So we can have anything in between the uncle in the beginning and the uncle at the end. Okay, so begins and ends with uncle. Okay, again, we're not going to have too many of those. All right, and then okay, then the last thing we're going to do is we're going to do a cleanup, and we're going to print the report. So let's see what has to be done in the way of cleanup. And what I have here is I want to close the input file. Do you absolutely have to close the input file? No, but it's good practice. So that's something that we want you to do. Okay. In simple programs like this, does it really kill it if you leave an input file open? No, it doesn't. But in certain other contexts, where programs are going to run for a long time, and they don't want to have memory leaks. One of the ways to leak memory is to open a file and not close it. So we want to close it largely for politeness and to train ourselves to use these better practices. And then the last thing that we want to do is we want to print out the results. So I got a bunch of prints here. Okay. And let's see how they go. Okay. And I've got, I'm going to put you on hold here because something's annoying me. I'll be right back. Okay, I'm back. So the last thing we want to do is we want to print all the lines. We want to print each of the counts. Okay. Now, I just want to talk about the size of main. Okay. We're finally getting to the point where main is a little big, right? Could I, for instance, try to factor out with things like uh, maybe I would take these three groups of code and extract them into methods of their own. Yeah, if this was more than a demonstration, I might do that. Okay, it's finally getting long enough that I'm tempted to do that, but I'm not going to do it this time. I'm gonna leave it all in the main just because. Okay, and now I've got two blank lines after the code for the main function. I have the invocation to main, and then I have one empty line. Okay, so let's try to run a test. Okay, so we're running the program my uncle, and the text for Journey to the Center of the Earth is in journey .text. Okay, and that's going to be in my starter files for this chapter's um, exercises. Okay, so let's just see what we got. So we got 503 lines contain the target string. 27 of those at the beginning, 10 at the end, 37 uh, uh, contain it either at the beginning or the end, which makes sense because 27 and 10 are 37. And 0 lines in the file contain the target string at the beginning and at the end. Okay, so pretty cool, right? So that's that one. All right, and I think the most interesting thing that we've done here is probably uh, show we can do all these things with patterns that are formed with raw strings. Okay. Um, Other than that, it's pretty straightforward stuff. Okay. So you're going to do a similar exercise. You're going to be using a different work. Um, you're not going to be using Journey to the Center of the Earth. So you're going to be looking for a different word, but you're going to be doing something pretty similar in your own uh, weekly coding assignment exercise 1. So I'm going to turn you loose on that, and I'll say bye until next time. Bye bye.